Good morning.
Hello, you all right?
Are we all adjusted and looking pretty?
Hang on, Chris. I'm just trying to
Face
get.
in the centre.
Is that better?
Oh, look at that. The spotlight's on David's face.
Hang on. I've just got to click. The meeting is being recorded. Got it. Now I'll take the cursor. It's about to shoot up your nose. Hang on. I'll stick it up here. The way.
Are you going to? Are you deliberately focusing a blinding light on your face for the recording today?
Well, yeah, because part of the story could include that, couldn't it?
Well, we'll have to see, won't we?
We'll have to see. Good day, viewer. Good to see you. And hope all's well. Not quite sure where our wonderful Pat from upstate New York is. She was in Stoke Abbott last weekend, I think, but I'm not quite sure whether she's gone back over the water yet. If you haven't, Pat, good safe journey when you do. And hope you enjoyed Stoke Abbott's visit. Sorry I missed you. There we are. And how are the Spanish contingent? Are they there yet, Chris?
Oh, they're in Tenerife. Yeah, the weather's bad, so they'll be in warm weather.
Yeah. So hello, Tenerifeans. If you're there, we hope you are and watching. If not, enjoy the sun and the sangria or whatever it is you get. And if you're just positioned in Loaders or Bridport or Beaminster or whatever, enjoy the miserable weather today. There we are.
Yeah, but it's not miserable. It's warmed up a little bit. It's almost going to feel like spring soon. We could have optimism in the air.
Chris, this is the Church of England, for heaven's sake, man. Come on, you should know better than that.
They haven't dragged me down yet.
Come on, we'll get there. We will get there. So there we are. Well, we were discussing, dear viewer, that there are 3 options for us to choose from, weren't we, Chris?
Yes. If we were live, we could have offered a live vote.
Good, yeah, that's good, yeah. Yeah, we could have done. Perhaps we should do that in advance each week. You can choose what you want. Should we try it one day?
Yeah. So do you want Candlemas or the 4th Sunday of Epiphany, or, which is actually the feast of the day of recording, the conversion of St. Paul?
Well, hang on. The lines are open. You've got 30 seconds to vote. Hang on, Chris, the votes are coming in. Almost there, another 10 seconds. Oh, the viewer wants the conversion of St. Paul, Chris.
Oh, that's rather unfortunate, isn't it? Because guess what reading I've got in front of me?
In front of you. This is so well done, isn't it? You can see the thought and process whirring behind us has
Makes
gone
you
in.
Think that these votes were not independently verified and counted.
Well, they have been independently verified because Ro has just done it for me. She's just laid down again at the back.
Okay, there you go.
Okay,
there you go.
She counted the bones on each list, and that's what we've gone for. We'll have a sup of me tea while we get ready. Should we have a pause?
We'll have a pause and a sup of tea. Reading is from Acts chapter 9. Meanwhile, Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any who belonged to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. Now, as he was going along and approaching Damascus, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" He asked, "Who are you, Lord?" The reply came, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But get up and enter the city, and you will be told what you are to do." The men who were traveling with him stood speechless because they heard the voice, but saw no one. Saul got up from the ground, and though his eyes were open, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. For 3 days he was without sight, and neither ate nor drank. Now there was a disciple in Damascus named Ananias, and the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias. He answered, Here I am, Lord. The Lord said, Get up, go to the street called Straight, at the house of Judas, and look for a man of Tarsus named Saul. At this moment he is praying. And he has seen in a vision a man named Ananias come in and lay his hands on him, so that he might regain his sight. But Ananias answered, Lord, I've heard from many about this man, how much evil he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the chief priests to bind all who invoke your name. But the Lord said to him, Go, for he is an instrument whom I have chosen to bring my name before Gentiles and kings and before the people of Israel. I myself will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name. So Ananias went and entered the house. He laid his hands on Saul and said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on your way here, has sent me so that you may regain your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit. And immediately something like scales fell from his eyes, and his sight was restored. Then he got up and was baptized, and after taking some food, regained his strength. For several days he was with the disciples in Damascus, and immediately he began to proclaim Jesus in the synagogue, saying, He is the Son of God. All who heard him were amazed and said, Is this not the man who made havoc in Jerusalem among those who invoked his name? And has he not come here for the purpose of bringing them bound before the chief priests? And Saul became increasingly more powerful and confounded the Jews who lived in Damascus by proving that Jesus was the Messiah. There, quite a long reading, an awful lot to talk about. The origin of the Damascus Road experience.
Just to start off, many years ago when I was a curate, and of course based in Exeter, we used to have Wednesday morning communion there because it was market day, and the farmers and the wives all came for not just for the cattle market, under the big market in the square, plenty of stores. So people would come to communion, the wife, as well. So we have quite a good congregation, 20 or 30 people there. And it was this day, and I was preaching. I was fairly new, and whatever. And I remember being well into the address, and said that Paul was blinded on the road to Emmaus. My colleague, Tony Sadler, was a wonderful, wonderful, godly man. Just quiet. He never said, he never shouted or lifted his voice ever in my time. He just very quietly and said, "That's funny. He was also blinded on the road to Damascus." I've never forgotten it, and I've made sure ever since I don't get too carried away and use the wrong road.
So I'll be confident you're on the right road now.
I hope I'm on the right road, and I hope the good Lord is allowing me to be on the right road. So there we are. It's a wonderful story, isn't it? Because one of the first things you hear in the New Testament about Paul is that he's standing, holding the coats of the people who are stoning Stephen to death.
Yeah.
He's such a fervent anti-New Way, people of the New Way, followers in the New Way, whatever they were known of in those days. And as it says in this story, he was forever getting licenses to go and arrest those who were following this New Way and to have them tried and put to death.
Yeah, I was interested and he took the same level of zealousness of persecution into the same level of promoting Jesus.
Yeah.
And he had that word immediately there to say, actually, straight away. It wasn't, I've got to wait 5 years worth of theological training and I've got to pray for another 5 years after that before I can tell anybody about Jesus.
Yeah. I'm very interested in that word immediately, Chris, and I'm going to look it up in the original.
I thought you were telling me you weren't a theologian.
I'm not in the least in that way. but I'm really interested because that word immediately crops up a lot in the Bible, doesn't it?
Yes.
Particularly in the Gospels. Immediately Jesus did that. Immediately he did the other. And I just wonder where it roots from, because it's obviously a word that is regularly used in the writing of the scriptures because it keeps on reoccurring.
Yeah, I think I read that actually the immediately means something important is about to happen. Take note.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
You know, it's not just a moment in time. It was actually, this is an important thing. Take note. It's a marker word.
Yeah. Oh, that's got a lot of common, a lot of sense to it. Yeah. So there we are, viewer. You've learned from our theological master, and she's not even here, but our theological master in Loaders. That it's a good thing. Yeah. Thank you. I like that. But yeah, immediately, take note. This is going to happen. And Paul, of course, yeah, you're quite right. He took this zealousness into his newfound faith, didn't he?
Mm.
But I often wonder what he must have felt like on that moment when, Wumph, he struck down. It's pretty violent, isn't it?
It is. What do you feel like? Whoa, what's happened? Yeah.
I'm frightened.
I don't know. I can't imagine Paul ever getting frightened.
Oh, I don't know. I think whoever zealous I was, I think I'd be frightened at this point. No, I'm not Paul, or thank heavens for that. But no, it's interesting. And then, of course, I often put my place in the. I try to get into these stories sometimes when I'm reading and preparing for things. I often wonder, the man who was sent to collect him, he must have been frightened to death, knowing this job.
Ananias, I think Ananias probably has more focus on my sermons than Paul.
Yeah.
Because there's a real man of courage.
Yeah. Go and do it.
Coming to arrest you, put you in chains and maybe kill you.
Yeah.
God says, "Oh, go and meet him then."
And tell him.
And tell him about Jesus.
Yeah.
So not just go and meet him, but keep your faith quiet.
Yeah.
Go and meet him and tell him about Jesus.
Tell him about Jesus, yeah.
And, because he's coming to arrest you because you're talking about Jesus. I mean, what a brave thing to do, and trust and faith that is.
Yeah.
And the result of it, which is that, because that's the second half of the story, isn't it? That's when Paul gets his eyesight back and really realizes it. That we then have all that evangelism.
And of course, Paul having been converted, starts annoying the other disciples, doesn't he? Because he says, "I'm also a disciple of Christ." Well, the understanding of a disciple for the others was that they'd actually seen and been and knew Jesus personally and had seen him at work. Mm. And they believe, I think, that Paul is stretching that a little bit by saying, "Well, I've seen him in the moment of conversion.
Road.
And I've seen the miracles he can do, because look what he's done to me." But the others aren't having that, are they? They're not too keen. They're not too keen on any of that at all.
So a bit of a controversial guy, wasn't he?
Yeah.
What do we take because you often hear the phrase, "Oh, it's my Damascus Road experience."
You do.
What does it take sometimes for people to believe? I remember one of the, I think it was when I was started to train for a reader, so many, many years ago, probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And the Archdeacon was talking about all those that were looking at starting some form of training, and he said, sometimes people listen to the small voice of God calling them. Other times they wait for the great big boot of God up their backside to get them moving.
Mm.
And I think Paul here, a small gentle voice of, actually, maybe I am right, maybe you should follow me, wouldn't have cut it with Paul.
No.
He needed that great big boot up his backside to say, "You're wrong. This is right." And we all respond in different ways. And sometimes we've just got to be aware of, we want the still small voice, and that sounds nice and romantic and gentle. But if we ever get it, we totally ignore it. And we need the more dramatic.
Yeah, I remember one of the sessions when I first started exploring possible calling to ministry, if that's the right word. One of the sessions we had to do with the then kind of person who was responsible for deciding with you and the next step on and appeared before the director of ordnance to try and make some further inroad into your calling. I remember it was a lady. She was the town centre chaplain for Wolverhampton, which included not just Marks and Spencers but Banks's Brewery, which seemed to be a great job to me at the time. But I remember her saying to us that we were going to read this story because she wanted us to try and think what was our Damascus Road moment.
Mm.
And I couldn't think what my Damascus Road moment was about because I'd always gone to church as a child, I'd just gone and had always been there and believed and had been a person of faith in the way I understood it. So what was that Damascus Road? And I think what you were saying, what suddenly brought you to this point? And I remember I was sat one day in my office when I was a nursing officer in the psychiatric hospital and was working away. And something suddenly stopped me in my tracks. And I kept hearing this, it wasn't a voice, but this thing inside me saying, I've got something more important for you to do than this. And I didn't understand for one moment what it was all about. And I kept hiding it. And I remember talking to Jane about it. She said, well, that's interesting. She said, perhaps you need to say a prayer about it. And, she said, is God saying something to you? And I said, well, he can't be wanting me because I like beer and football and women and that kind of stuff. He doesn't want those kind of people. And it's amazing, isn't it, that God actually wants everybody. And sometimes it is that big boot of the backside that you've just described. And I remember that's what I said in front of this other group of people like me, who were at a very, very early stage of exploring potential calling into whatever it was we felt we possibly were being called to. Because you never know at that point, do you, what the calling is to or how far it'll go. And I always remember that was the point. She said, listen to this reading and then try and explain what you think your moment of calling was.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love hearing different people's stories of how they were called, how they were saved, and what it was. We went through actually because I'm training some lay worship leaders at the moment, and we went through everybody's story as to why they were there and when they first started going to church, and it was absolutely brilliant because it was some people like that. Well, I've always gone to church as a kid. To one, well, actually, I was milking the cows one day and I heard the church bells ringing and I thought I ought to go to church. So the following week, I finished milking my cows, put on my coat, and I went to church. And that was like 40 years ago, and I'm still going. And now looking at training to be a lay worship leader. I mean, it's a fascinating story.
It is.
And it's real, that's real down to earth, practical rural life, and it's also a huge compliment. I mean, maybe it's going down not quite the Ananias route, but just think of all those people who faithfully do their Christian duty every week, who faithfully ring a bell, who faithfully prepare a church or walk down the street. I had another one when I was leaving my job to go to full-time college to train. One of the salesmen that used to visit me because I was running an engineering company, he lived in Wales. He said, "You know what?" He said, "I often walk my dog on a Sunday morning and I see the people walking to church." He said, if I thought they were a bit more nearer my age, I'd think about going. But he actually noticed all those old ladies walking to church on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, faithfully.
With envy. And I want to be like that. I mean, whether I haven't heard from him for 10 years, so I don't know what he's doing now. But I think you don't really realise, we probably walk to church thinking, oh, people will laugh at me if they know I'm going to church. They think it's stupid. But you get people that, they're going to church. That's a nice idea. Damascus Road, what brings you to Jesus?
Yeah, and what response Paul could have still said, although he'd been blinded, when his sight came back, I'm having none of this. Thank you, Ananias, you're clapped up in chains, as you said earlier.
Yeah, well, that was right.
And it's all right being called, but what is our response? And you listed a few people, roles that people do. There are many roles, whether it be cutting grass, doing flowers, or even just knocking on somebody's door because it's what we feel called to do. That could be the response. And not everybody is called to ordained ministry or licensed ministry as a worship leader or a pastoral assistant, but we're all called to do something. And how do we respond? Do we respond like Paul? Well, of course, the end of this story, if we carry on reading it, is that eventually he has to get out of where he is, doesn't he? Because people are after him now, all of a sudden. And isn't he let down over a wall in a basket to escape?
Well, yeah, I mean, in a way, it's, because it's a lot. Yeah, it was quite a long reading, and I was sitting there thinking, I ought to stop now. But I thought, no, I'll go to the end of the official bit. And, because it does end, Saul became more powerful and confounded the Jews, proving that Jesus was the Messiah. So he went from standing up, saying Jesus was wrong, to Jesus is. It's a lovely story.
Yes,
I mean, I know people argue about some of his letters because he does cause a bit of controversy. But a guy with that amount of zeal is always going to be a bit controversial.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with the church being controversial so long as it's within its ideology of what we really believe faith is about. I wouldn't want to cause a controversy just for the sake of it. But sometimes you have to stick up for your principles and for what you genuinely believe Christ is asking us to do and to be and to say. And that's not about making trouble, but it's about proclaiming that God is love in the world, that God doesn't want fighting and killing, that God does want fairness and justice for everybody, which we don't see all the time, do we? And so long as it's done with an intention of wanting to get recognised that we should all be treated fairly and true and trust and properly. I don't think there's a problem about being controversial. People often think, we'll say, you've heard it, Chris, you shouldn't mix church and politics. Actually, I think you should from time to time, because there's nothing wrong with raising issues that need to be defended because they're just wrong.
I tell you what,
or that it's not right.
I think there's a lovely phrase answer from Ananias here that it almost highlights an awful lot that's wrong at the moment, and it goes along that line.
If
we disagree with somebody, we turn it into an insult, and we insult them for being wrong. But Ananias just says, Lord, I've heard from many about this man, how much evil he has done to your saints. So he's describing his actions and knowing that Paul is still loved. He doesn't say, oh, Paul's an evil man because he's killing lots of people. And there's a huge distinction there. And it takes, if you call somebody evil, you're turning it into an insult. And he's actually saying, I know his acts are wrong. And it's so he knows his deeds are wrong, and that's why I'm scared, but he's still loved. And maybe we need to do that more often, It's so easy to judge people we disagree with, and forget that even if you disagree with them, they're still loved, and they're still a person.
Yeah, and I think part of the disagreement, if you believe somebody has got we've all got different opinions of each other. That's part of life. But you can discuss as to why each of you have different views and try and convince each other that perhaps you need to relook or read whatever. But everyone's entitled to a view, and but ultimately, as a Christian, we believe that fairness, justice, love, peace are the cornerstones of what Jesus stood for. I mean, Jesus wasn't meek and mild. All these people who think that Jesus was meek and mild, any more than Paul was going to be meek and mild just because he saw the light, so to speak. He was saved, whatever word you want to use. And how many times have you been stopped by preachers in the middle of a town centre saying, "Have you been saved?" It's a kind of whatever, and I smile at them because I think, well, I hope so. I'm never quite sure. I hope so, but it's very, very interesting, this idea that that there's a lot to do. Jesus stands for love, peace, fellowship, truth, honesty. And that's what we need to be standing up for. And that's eventually what Paul did, but in a very fervent way, as we know.
So there you go, dear viewer. That's an awful lot to talk about, an awful lot of things to think about.
It was.
Dear Paul, what a wonderful man
he
ended up being, even for those who disagree with his theology, or those who love his theology.
Do you have a particular letter of Paul's that you like, Chris?
That's a good question. I mean, there's the grace bit in Galatians.
Yeah.
Ephesians, Galatians, Ephesians is about putting on the armor and being armed and prepared. I think that series, I call it the Go Eat Popcorn. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians.
Yeah.
It was just the way of remembering them in order.
Yeah.
Probably more so. I don't tend to focus on Thessalonians and Timothy, Titus so much. But then at college, I was told that it's possible that Paul didn't write Timothy, and Titus.
Absolutely. We don't know. I have one particular I really love to read, and we do get to read it once every 3 years, and you read it in its entirety. That's Paul's letter to Philemon. I think it's absolutely beautiful. When he's writing to somebody, he says, your slave may have been wrong, but take him back, don't kill him, take him back.
Take him back.
He's one of our beloved brothers.
It's a very short, half a chapter.
I love the letter.
Isn't it?
But the whole letter, it's a proper letter. But the others, you're quite right. There are bits. I think it's bits of all of them that are very special in some way. But I just love the writing to Philemon, and it's very special. Well, there we are, dear viewer. Have a look, look into it, and if you fancy a read, do read Philemon. It's a lovely little letter about a slave who's run off, and Paul's trying to persuade his master to take him back without killing him, or sending him off, or selling him on to somebody else.
There you go.
There we are. Well, Chris, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. You know where to find us because you have. And we'll see you next week.
And we're back next week, Chris?
Yes.
You'll be back next week? Yep. Jolly good.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Lovely. See you soon.